Hey, check this out. Do you like mystery thrillers? Well, you are in for a show today. Check out this email I received last night. Dear Vin, I just learned that my mystery thriller, Letters from the Dead, is a finalist in the Reader Views Literary Awards in the Mystery, Thriller, Suspense, Horror category. Previously, it received a 5-star rating from Reader's Favorite International Book Awards and was one of 6 finalists in the Mystery, Thriller, Suspense category. My name is Vin Dacquino. Our next guest is George Hopkins. George, let's talk writing.
How you doing, Vin?
A pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Your books have people on the edge of their seats, and it's time to put these viewers on the edge of their seats.
Okay.
George, who are you? When did all this start?
I'm just a man like everybody else, okay? Not everybody, but I was a teacher for a long, long time, and along the way I decided that I like to write. I guess my writing really started when I was at Iona. I had a professor there whom I read pretty well, and I wrote a crazy story about 6-foot man-eating rats.
Oh, lovely.
And he loved it. He thought it was true. And I said, well, that's the way I get to him. So I realized I had something. I was the sports editor up at Iona, assistant sports editor, and then editor for a while.
Wow.
And so I got to writing. I like writing. I majored in English. I enjoyed it. And that's about it.
And what subject did you teach?
I taught English.
Ah, nice. Me too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And I know what I did is I stole time, weekends and nights and whenever I could. Is that what you did as well?
Well, yes. When I was in high school, when I was teaching high school, I decided to write a novel. And I went down to my basement because, well, actually it's a cellar. And I went down there and I had a little typewriter. Remember those things?
Oh, yeah, I remember those
and
things.
I would be writing on my workbench, and a little head would come behind me and say, "What you doing, Daddy?" So
Yeah.
I once got into a situation where the detective was in a compromising situation. So I called my aunt, who was a policewoman, and I said, Elizabeth, what happens in this particular situation? And she said, why don't you do what all the other writers do? And I said, what's that? Throw them into bed. I said, I can't do that. My kids are looking, Well, now my kids are a little older.
Yeah, so now you can throw them in bed.
I can throw them in bed. And now I'm upstairs by the bathroom with my computer, and I type up there.
Yeah, now, that's interesting that you should say about going to someone for some of the, crime scenes. And I remember when I was doing a book that, incidentally, has never been published yet, when Tommy Returns, there was a situation where this boy had to be arrested and put in the back of a police car and taken to the police station.
Okay.
Well, I had never had that experience.
Right.
So a friend of mine was the chief of police in the town I was teaching. And I said, Louis, you got to do me a favor, buddy. You got to arrest me. He said, what a pleasure. No problem. And he went through the whole thing.
Oh, he did?
Fingerprinted me.
Oh, no.
I had to go through the entire thing so I could get a sense of what this kid would do.
Sure.
He put me in the back of the police car,
Okay.
locked the doors, took me, handcuffed me, brought me into the station, handcuffed me to the wall on the board that they had there, so that I could have the real sense of what my character would go through.
Sure.
Now, do you do that kind of thing?
Yes, yeah. I
Wow.
recently went to a birthday party for a friend of mine. He's written a few books, and at it I met the father of one of my son Patrick, who's a dean in high school, and he's a basketball coach, and he played ball with this fella who's now a detective. The son, the father was a homicide detective, first grade, and he had suggested to me he will take me to an autopsy. And so I'm looking. I hate to say this. I'm looking forward to it.
I know,
but it puts you in a situation. In fact, the book I'm working on right now, I had a situation where there is a crime scene, and what happens at the end of the crime scene. And I was online, and I wrote to someone, and people are so helpful. They really do want to help you.
Yeah.
I had a New York City detective who told me what happens, and so that we'll incorporate that into the story.
Yeah, and it's important to feel what your characters feel.
Sure, it
So
is.
that you can make it realistic. Now, the book you're talking about, your first one,
Yes.
is Blood Brothers.
Yes.
Ah, good book. Tell me about Blood Brothers, and how did Blood Brothers come about?
It's really kind of interesting. I was at a cocktail party. A lot of my life seems to revolve around cocktail parties. Well, we're having
Been there, done that.
having a few wines, and the person who was having the party said, "I have an idea for you. Would you like to do this?" And what it was that someone would be standing at a subway station in Manhattan, and it would be a mob boss, and suddenly the person would be pushed in front of the train.
Whoa.
And I said, "Whoa, that's kind of." He says, "Yeah, but the person who pushes him is a priest."
Whoa.
So now he said, "I challenge you to write." Well, don't challenge me to do anything, because I pick up challenges. So
Yeah.
so I mulled about it for a while, and then I had a friend of mine who was a priest who called one night and he said, "Can I come over to the house?" And he was very upset. And of course I gave him a scotch, because priests like scotch.
Yeah, of course.
And we sat there, and he had just found out that his younger brother was in the army, and he was recruited to do missions in other countries, which was basically, they were assassination missions, like the unit was on.
Wow.
And he found out because his brother was he was in a situation where a little girl was screaming, and he turned his and he almost shot her. He said, "What am I doing? This is crazy." So I took both my friend at the cocktail party,
Wow.
my friend the priest, put them together, and I have a hard-nosed detective, Tom Cavanaugh, and his half-brother, Jack Bennis, and they basically meet. Jack Bennis became a priest because of things that happened. He left early to join the service, and then he went, and a lot of complications happened, and that's what happened with that. I wrote that book, and it was received well. There's a nice chase scene in Greenwood Cemetery in it. So
Ballpark, how long did it take you to write it?
I would say about 12 months. I picked up the pace because the background plot is an assassination attempt to kill Fidel Castro. And I was watching TV one night, and I saw Fidel Castro trip. And I said, "Oops, there goes my story." I thought he was dead. So what I did was I did a lot of research, and I really found out some strange things. Our CIA tried to kill Castro in so many ways,
Wow.
in so many ridiculous ways, from exploding tortoises to debilitating powder in his boots. A lot of they gave him a swimsuit that had poison in it. That it was crazy.
So how do you go about getting this kind of information?
Well, I went online. I did a lot of it online, and I went.
And it was there.
It was there. Yeah, it really was.
Wow.
And it was scary. You
Yeah.
think about it. So I used a little bit of imagination, put
Yep.
it together, and we got the story out, and it was received very well. We had a local contest. I won second prize in it, and,
Wow.
and that was good. And then some people said to me, "Well, what happens next? Are you going to write another?" And I hadn't thought of it, but
Yeah.
I realized that I did leave. In fact, may I read just the last?
Oh, please, please.
See, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I did was, at the end of the book, this is just the last paragraph. Kavanaugh looked at the letter. He received a letter from his brother, and an uneasy thought crept into his head. He suddenly started to feel sick. Then he checked the envelope. His hand was shaking when he saw the letter was postmarked from Havana, Cuba.
Wow.
Now the idea is maybe his brother is going to try to kill Castro.
Wow.
And that led
Leads to
this-
Collateral Consequences. So after this book, you went to another book,
yes.
Collateral Consequences, and tell me a little bit about Collateral Consequences.
Well, the brother leaves to go to Cuba, and basically to find his mind to do the right thing, to be a priest and not an assassin. And so what happens, he goes there, and he left a trail behind him of people who wanted him dead.
Whoa.
And so someone is out to kill him in Havana. Now his half-brother has this feeling, a real strong feeling that his brother's in trouble. And so he decides to go to Cuba to help his brother. Now, it's difficult to get to Cuba. You're not allowed to go there.
And difficult to get out once you're in.
Yes. So I went again with imagination, with facts, and I have him going through Canada with his girlfriend to Cuba, and in that process, I found out a lot of other things. I found out, for example, that what's his name? I forgot his name now. He was a mob boss down in Cuba, and he basically made a lot of money down there. But he also was involved somewhat. There was another rumor that the mob was out to kill Kennedy, and I did a lot of research.
I remember all those things growing up.
Yeah.
The whole Cuban crisis scared me half to death.
Yeah. I was in the service with the Marines when we came back from leave, and we went in to see Kennedy give his speech about
Wow.
It was scary.
Now, have you ever been in Cuba?
No, I wasn't.
Wow. So that was tough. So you had to
So I did a lot of
fill
research.
those
Yes,
empty warehouses.
Yeah, I did. My wife thought I was crazy. I bought every book I could find on Cuba.
Wow.
I have pictures of it all. And my neighbor was from Cuba, and I had another friend who visited there, and so I gleaned from different people, from books from different parts, and put it together. And it's good. But at the end of Collateral Consequences, they leave. And again, a lot of different things happen there. And they come back to the States. And that was the end of that book.
So that was the end of the story. So there wasn't another book to follow that.
Well, there was. So what happened was they come back and they're on Staten Island. That's where I'm from. Okay, so what happens is they're on Staten Island, and the detective has burnt some bridges, and the district attorney, he's annoyed at him because he knows he's skated around, so he transfers him to Tottenville Precinct, which is the farthest place on Staten Island in the city. It's way out there. It's sort of a punishment place for some people. It used to be.
Wow.
And the priest ends up on Staten Island. And so now in this book, this is Letters from the Dead.
Oh, here we go, folks. Letters from the Dead. Book number 3.
Okay, it's the same characters, okay, but this time the priest decides he's going to take a leave of absence because he brought back with him a nurse from Cuba who was in danger for her life. But a priest with a woman doesn't sort of fit. So she's got eyes for him, and he's feeling maybe eyes for her. But he takes a leave of absence. And then what happens is there's a murder at a school, and there is another person in here who's a serial killer. And he decides to go after people who he thinks have been involved with his daughter's suicide. His daughter was cyberbullied in school, and she went home and committed suicide. So anybody involved with that, he goes after. And in the process, he goes after Kavanaugh here.
Wow.
And now it just so happens that Bennis is, as a layperson, teaching in that school. And so they come together again in the hunt for a serial killer. And it's a lot of action in it. So there we go.
All right, so you've created 3 books, and these 3 books are out there.
Yes.
Now, are you still teaching?
Yes and no. I'm teaching a workshop, a writer's workshop.
Oh, good,
that's
good. Boy, we have similar lines. I taught for like 35 years.
Yes, so did I.
And now I do a lot of writers' workshop. Talk to a lot of writers. What kind of advice do you give to these writers in these workshops?
Just keep writing. I think you have to write. And
writers write,
right.
talkers talk.
Yes. In fact, I came today to meet you, and I brought my little book with me.
Oh,
Wherever I go, whether it's a doctor's office or what have you, I have my little book. I do my writing, and hey, then I go home and
So you just kind of like write down the ideas that you have in your head at the time.
You know, we used to talk about the 3 P's for writers. You know, the first one was perfection. You want it perfect. The second one is because you want it perfect, you procrastinate. You know, and then after you procrastinate, the last stage is paralysis. You don't do anything. So the idea is that you get it out there, you do it, and you know, with me, my writing ends up at the end of the day. My wife seems to think that she's going to watch this and she's going to be mad at me. But she thinks I'm goofing off if I'm sitting at the computer, you know. So you got to find a time. So usually late at night when she's asleep, the kids are all out of the house now, I will be there. And I think it was Tom Clancy who said, if you write 1 page a day, at the end of a year, you'll have 365 pages.
There you go.
You'll have a book. So I'll get there trying to write 1 page, and invariably I'll end up writing a lot more. You know. So
one of the things I discovered working with as many writers as I do is that there's no set style.
No.
Writers are different. I mean, there's people who will tell you the best place to write is right at the kitchen table, right in the middle of everything. Others will tell you, nah, your best bet is to find a little corner of the house, the cellar, the basement.
Yeah.
You have to find what works for
Yes,
you.
yeah.
Also, middle of the night, that's a secret I've had for years.
Yeah.
Phone doesn't ring. No one's bothering you in the middle of the night. There's few people up 3, 4 o'clock. Some of my writers say, you sent me an email at 4 o'clock in the morning. What were you doing up? I said, are you serious? That's the best time of the day for a writer.
Quiet. It's good.
Because it's
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah.
And the procrastinator you're talking about, that little voice in the back, man, I've washed a car, I've done laundry, I even mopped the floors to get away from writing sometimes.
Yes, yeah.
Because procrastination will kill you.
Yeah, well.
And it does, it gets in the way.
Yeah, so you have to actually get out there. It may not be free writing. You get
Yep.
out there, you write it, then you look it over. It's the first draft is not the last draft.
No,
You
no.
have to go back over it again and
Yep.
again, you know. And I will sometimes be up until 2, 3 o'clock in the
Yeah.
morning, and not realizing where I am. It used to be that when I tried to do it around dinner time, my wife would call me for dinner.
That's right.
And she
Well,
would
you
be in,
smell the food and it distracts you.
but then I'd come down and I'd be a grouch, you know. And she said, "Well, why are you like this?" I said, "Well, you know, it's hard to go from the mind of a murderer
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
to a
Yeah.
nice, loving husband." And
When I first got married, no, I didn't get married till I was like almost 30 years old. So I had plenty of time to be me, you know. And I would go to my mother-in-law's for a Sunday dinner.
oh yes, yes.
And she'd sit across the room and look at me and she'd go, "Stop writing!" You know, because my mind was
yes,
absolutely not there.
yes,
I'd
yeah,
write.
yes.
You know, I'd be leaving a chapter to
Yes,
go there.
yes,
And
yeah.
my mind
Yes,
keeps
yeah.
writing,
I-
you know, because writing in many ways is a haunting.
Yes, it is. I understand why writers drink. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
It's a solitary thing that you do. It really
Yeah,
is. So
yeah.
they tell a story about someone who died and he was a writer, and he's given his choice of going to heaven or hell. So he went down to hell and he saw them all sitting at typewriters writing, and he went up to heaven. He saw them all sitting at typewriters. He says, "I don't see what's the difference." He said, "Well, yeah." He says, "But in heaven they get published."
There you go.
That's the difference. Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about that for a minute. What about this whole idea of publishing? I mean, writing is writing. Publishing is a business.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different thing to get in front of an audience, to get your book, send it out there. I always say it's like getting your child and sending them to college.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
after you've done whatever you're going to do,
Yeah.
he's on his own, man.
That's right.
So what about that? How did you go from writer to published author?
Well, what happened is that with the Castro thing, I realized I better get this out there. And
Yeah.
a friend of mine told me about self-publishing.
Yep.
And I went to Ex Libris, and they did a very nice job of it and they put the book out there. The trouble was the price that they charged was exorbitant for anybody to buy.
Yeah.
So the last book I went to was Outskirts Press, and they were cheaper. You know, in other words, I could set the price that somebody
Right.
could really afford. But there are other places. Create Space is one.
Yes.
and,
Now, Create Space. Many of
and
my
Lulu,
writers
yes,
go to Create Space.
yes.
A couple of my books
Yes,
are Create
yeah,
Space.
yeah. It's a good deal, you know.
Create Space could be anywhere from free.
Yes.
I mean, you buy your books, you have to buy the proof copies, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Or you could have them edit it. You could have them do the cover.
Yeah.
It's up to you how much money you really want to put into this.
Yeah.
Self-publishing has come a long way.
Yeah, I went to a writer's workshop in Manhattan, and agents were there, and the agents were telling us what was going on. And as I listened to them, if the agent takes your book, the agent has to pitch it to a publisher, and there are a few major publishing companies around now. And if that happens, they take it. It could be 2-3 years before it's
I
gone.
know.
Now I don't
Kiss
know.
the Candy Days
You
did that.
may not believe it, but I'm not getting any younger.
I don't believe it, no.
So.
One of the best terms I ever had for what happens with traditional publishing, I heard recently, and now it has become one of my favorite words for traditional publisher: gatekeepers. in many ways, that's exactly what they are. They're the gatekeepers. And for years, they decided what went in the gate and what didn't. And many wonderful authors went to their graves
Yes.
with wonderful books
Yeah.
because they couldn't get in the door. I mean, even with Kiss the Candy days,
Yeah.
I went through a whole series. It was my first book.
Yeah.
And when I finally got to Dell, and then they finally got it in the bookstores, it was like almost 3 years before this book
Yes.
got there. Create Space,
Yes.
2 or 3 months.
Yes. Yeah. It's much better.
Big difference.
Big difference.
Now,
yeah.
you don't get the publicity.
No.
You don't get the exposure. But these days, shelf life
Yeah.
for a traditional book is like 6 months.
Yes.
Gets in the bookstore 6 months later, you can't find it.
That's right. That's right.
So this whole idea of self-publishing, different ballgame.
yeah. It
It's
definitely
also Create Space. You get royalties
Yeah,
for your
yeah,
books.
yeah.
And there is an opportunity to get it out there. And you own the rights.
Yeah, I know.
So you could turn around and sell that book
is. Right.
to a traditional publisher after.
Yeah, it's true. The first book, I made enough royalties on it. This is really interesting, that I could take my wife to McDonald's twice.
Wow.
Twice,
I couldn't do
twice.
that. I had to go to the hot dog truck.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, you're right. If you're looking to be a millionaire,
I'm just interested in getting people to read the book, and
There you
when I get feedback that they enjoyed it, that's great.
and is it possible to become a millionaire with a self-published book? Yes.
Yes, yeah,
Is it
it is.
difficult? Yes.
Yes.
Is it difficult with a traditional book? Yes.
Yes, yeah,
You have to write because your heart is into it, not your wallet.
yeah, that's right.
Now I've written a number of books, and they're for me.
Yeah,
You know, and it feels good to have people
Sure.
read it, but you have something that you really want to say, and you need to say it. Now, what is the big George Hopkins message?
Well, I think that we are our brother's keeper. You know that.
Oh,
we,
yeah.
We're all in this world together. And what I particularly like about Letters from the Dead is I bring up the villain. The characters are multidimensional, okay, and the villain is a person who's really suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, and he doesn't know it, but it's there. And I have a few other characters in the book who are also suffering from this. But we all have problems. It's not a black and white world. I remember
sure.
when I joined the Marines, and I thought this was great because everything was so regimented. But it's not like that, you know. There are so many grays and shades.
Yep.
So that's what I try to get across this.
And rights and wrongs
Yes.
have very smudgy lines.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I do
So
hear that.
My priest in the first book ends up killing mob bosses.
Wow.
Now he kills them because he sees the police aren't doing anything. He sees nothing's happening, and he sees the kids in the neighborhood, something's happening. He reverts to what he learned in the service. Is it wrong? Yes. You know, but he does it, and then he
Yeah.
tries to redeem himself afterwards.
Now, your characters come from nowhere or everywhere? Are they like little pieces of people?
Everywhere. I think it's like Tennyson said, I'm a porthole. I go through, and I reach everything. You know. So
Yeah, you take little pieces of everything.
on the ride here, I was saying, well, this could be in my book. You know?
Yeah. What about settings? Now, settings.
Well, actually, the settings Cuba, I had to go through research to do it.
Yep.
But now I'm on Staten Island in this book.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm using local things that I know about.
Yeah, I
and
find myself more comfortable when I'm using settings that I'm
Yeah.
familiar with.
Yeah.
And when I'm not, I get familiar with them.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
Like, again, for Kiss the Candy days, this is a boy who had diabetes. I went to the hospital and spent the night.
Yes.
For when Tommy returns, I went to a psychiatric ward.
Yes.
Fortunately, I knew the head of the department who allowed
Yeah.
me to go there
Yeah.
and kind of observe. And you have to kind of be there.
Sure.
Smell it, feel it, know
Yeah.
it, so that you can deliver that
Yeah.
to your public.
That's right.
All right, so you've written 3 books.
Yes. Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
I'm working on a 4th one.
Whoa!
I didn't think I would, but what happened is I got an email from a friend of mine who was a criminal judge.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I've got an idea for you. And I said, Charlie, why don't you write it yourself? Because
Yeah.
it's your story.
Yeah.
He said, no, I don't want to write it. You take it. I said, it's not going to be your story. I'm going to change it. So
Right.
he said, well,
Right.
he said, do whatever you want with it. You can have it. And what it is about a death threat to a judge that he actually received.
Wow.
Now, I have twisted it around and I have brought both of my characters into the story. So, and it's not his story really anymore.
Do we have a working title?
Random Acts of Malice is
Good title. You have good titles. I like your titles.
Thanks. This one, Blood Brothers, that was a crucifix my father had actually carved.
Wow.
And there's the 45, which the priest actually uses to do away with his.
Wow.
His
So
villains.
you're working on this new book. It's underway.
Yes.
And when can we expect this new book?
I've got about 200 pages done, so I
Wow.
figure
So you're moving along.
I'm moving along. So.
And do you do public appearances?
Yes, if anybody wants me, but they have to find me.
You hear that, folks? He does public appearances.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear George Hopkins, go to his website. We've been broadcasting it at the bottom of the screen. You need to get a hold of George and find out where he's coming from. And what about your workshops? Are they open?
Well, I'm doing it on Staten Island. And,
Okay, Staten Island. So if you get near Staten Island, that's the place to be.
Yeah.
And you help authors
Yes,
get their books going.
Yes.
Is this like at a library? Is it a?
Oh, it's at a museum, the John Noble Maritime Museum. But it's it is. It's
Terrific. All right. Well, we have been moving along too quickly.
Okay.
We're getting close. George, what do we want to leave them with?
Well, I think if you have a story, and I think everybody does have a story, get it out there. Do it. Don't just sit there.
Make that move.
And it need not be like I really got started. I started writing articles for the newspaper, basically memoirs, and they were well received. And somebody said to me, "I don't know how you do it because you're saying so much about yourself. How do you do that?" I said, "Well, I never thought about it. I'm just being honest."
That's right.
And then from that, I actually have written some poetry, and the poetry has been again well received.
Yep.
But it's so I like to write, and it is a solitary.
So if
thing.
you have a good story to tell, don't talk about it. Write it. Writers write. Talkers talk. We have been pleased to be talking with George Hopkins. We thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure to have you with us. George, keep on doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. I know you came a long way. You came all the way from Staten Island to be here.
my
Fortunately,
pleasure.
you came on a great day.
It's a beautiful day.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us. Stay with us. We're going to have other exciting writers for you. Writers write. Talkers talk. Get started the minute this show ends. Thank you for joining us. George.